June 4, 1942. In the space of a few minutes, 3 Japanese aircraft carriers go from hunting the U.S. fleet to burning wrecks. The Pacific War just flipped. This is how the U.S. won the Battle of Midway. Not with more ships, not with luck, with a single fake message about a broken water tank. 6 months earlier, Japan crippled the U.S. fleet at Pearl Harbor. Now they were coming to finish the job. America was outgunned, outnumbered, and outranged. And yet the U.S. carriers were waiting in exactly the right place, as if someone had read the enemy's battle plan. By the end of this video, you'll know who did, and how 13 words about water sank an empire's navy. To understand Midway, you have to start with the wound. December 7, 1941. Pearl Harbor. Japanese carrier planes hit the U.S. Pacific Fleet at anchor. 8 battleships hit. More than 2,400 Americans dead. In a single morning, the United States lost its battle line. But the Japanese missed something. The American aircraft carriers were not in port that day. They were at sea. And in the war that was coming, the carrier, not the battleship, would be king. That single fact changed everything. For decades, sea power meant battleships. Big guns, thick armor. But a battleship can only hit what its guns can reach. A carrier strikes from over the horizon with aircraft the enemy never sees leave the deck. Pearl Harbor had just proven it. The age of the battleship died at its own moment of triumph. For 6 months, Japan ran wild. The Philippines, Singapore, the Dutch East Indies, Wake Island, one conquest after another. The U.S. Navy was on its back foot, trading space for time. Then Japan made a choice. Finish the American fleet for good. The bait would be a tiny coral atoll in the middle of the ocean, Midway. Take Midway, lure the surviving U.S. carriers into a trap, and destroy them. That's the question this video answers. How did the U.S. win the Battle of Midway when every number on paper said they should have lost? The answer isn't on the ships, it's in a basement. Before we go further, hit subscribe. We tell one story like this every day. Don't miss the next one. Let's be precise about what Pearl Harbor did and what it didn't do. It sank battleships. The USS Arizona exploded and took over 1,000 men down with her. The USS Oklahoma rolled over at her moorings. It looked like a knockout blow. But look closer. The Japanese pilots hit ships. They left the base standing, the repair yards, the dry docks, and critically, the fuel storage tanks. Millions of gallons of oil sitting in plain sight, untouched. Admiral Chester Nimitz took command of the Pacific Fleet weeks later. He stood over the wreckage and understood the truth. Japan had hit the muscle. They'd missed the brain, the shipyards that could raise the sunken fleet, the tank farm that fueled every operation, and the carriers still afloat, still dangerous. Think of it like a boxer. Japan had bloodied America's face, broken its nose, but the legs were still under him, the heart was still beating, the oil to keep fighting, the yards to rebuild, the ships that mattered most. All of it survived the morning of December 7th. Here's the part most people never hear. Pearl Harbor was also home to something with no guns at all, a small secret intelligence unit. Its job, to listen to the Japanese Navy talk to itself, and to break the code it spoke in. That unit was called Station HYPO, and it survived December 7th completely intact. Go down a flight of stairs in the Pacific Fleet headquarters, past a locked steel door, into a windowless basement that smelled of stale cigarette smoke and cold coffee. The men inside called it the dungeon. This was Station HYPO. Its commander was a man named Joseph Rochefort, a U.S. Navy officer, fluent in Japanese, and one of the strangest figures in the war. He worked in a red smoking jacket and bedroom slippers. He went days without leaving the basement. He slept on a cot beside the code tables. Rochefort's team was hunting a Japanese naval code. The Americans called it JN25. It was a code on top of a cipher, tens of thousands of 5-digit number groups, each standing for a word or a phrase, then scrambled again. To read it, you had to break 2 locks at once. By hand, with no computers. Just card files, pencils, and exhausted men with extraordinary memories. Understand what that meant day after day. No machine handed them the answer. Every solved word was a guess, tested against 100 others. A single number group could take days to crack. Then the Japanese would shift the code and much of the work began again. Rochefort's men lived on catnaps and cigarettes. They were wrecking their health in that basement, and winning the war without firing a shot. By the spring of 1942, they were reading pieces of it. Not all of it. Maybe 10 to 15% of any given message. Fragments. A date here. A ship name there. A geographic code word. And one code word kept appearing. AF. The Japanese were building an operation around a place they called AF. A huge operation. Carriers, battleships, an invasion force. Rochefort was sure AF meant Midway, but Washington disagreed. Some senior officers thought AF was a feint. They feared the real target was the West Coast, or the Aleutian Islands off Alaska, or even Pearl Harbor again. Everything depended on getting this right. Send the carriers to the wrong ocean, and Midway falls and the door to Hawaii swings open. Rochefort needed proof, so he set a trap with words. This is the trick that won the battle, and it's so simple it's almost funny. Rochefort knew the Japanese were listening to American radio traffic too, so he decided to make them confirm their own target, without ever knowing they'd been played. The plan went up the chain to Nimitz, who approved it. Midway's garrison was told to send a message in plain English, no code at all. The message said, in effect, "Our water distillation plant has broken down. We're running short of fresh water." A small lie. A broken water tank on a tiny island. Totally routine. But it was aimed like a rifle. If AF really was Midway, the Japanese would repeat the water shortage in their own reports, and HYPO would be listening. If AF was somewhere else, the message would vanish into silence. One broadcast. One chance to make the enemy answer a question he didn't know he'd been asked. The message went out by radio and undersea cable. And then HYPO waited. Within about 2 days, the listening posts caught it. A Japanese intelligence message in their own code reporting that AF is short of fresh water. There it was. The enemy had just told the United States in his own words that AF, the giant target of his entire operation, was Midway. Think about what just happened. The Japanese plan was to spring a surprise ambush, to lure the Americans out and destroy them, and in one intercepted sentence, the whole thing inverted. Now the Americans knew the target. Soon they'd know the rough date and the direction of approach. The ambushers were about to be ambushed, and they had no idea. Now before this sounds easy, look at the actual odds, because knowing where the enemy is doesn't mean you can beat him. Japan sent a staggering force toward Midway. At its heart, 4 fleet carriers, Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, Hiryu, the same elite carrier force that had attacked Pearl Harbor, veteran pilots, the best naval aviators in the world at that moment. Behind them came battleships, cruisers, and a separate invasion fleet. More than 200 ships in total across the operation. It was one of the largest naval forces ever assembled. And what did the United States have? 3 carriers, Enterprise, Hornet, and one more if she could even reach the battle. The USS Yorktown had taken serious damage weeks earlier at the Battle of the Coral Sea. A bomb had punched deep into her. The damage estimates ran to weeks of repair, maybe months. Nimitz gave them 72 hours. Think about the gamble in that order. The experts said weeks, maybe months. Nimitz said 3 days, not because the ship was ready, but because the men in the basement had told him the fight was coming now. A third of his carrier strength lay wrecked in dry dock, and he chose to send her anyway. Roughly 1,400 shipyard workers swarmed the Yorktown at Pearl Harbor, around the clock. Welders, steel workers, electricians. The lights of the dry dock burned all night. They cut away wreckage and braced her with steel. In 3 days, they did what should have taken 3 months. The Yorktown steamed out to the battle with crews still welding her wounds. 3 American carriers, against 4, outnumbered, outgunned, but not for once outguessed. Dawn, June 4, 1942. The Pacific is flat and gray. Admiral Nagumo commands the Japanese carriers. He believes he has the initiative. He thinks no U.S. carrier is anywhere near, so he does what the plan demands. He launches a strike against Midway Island itself. But the Americans are there, just over the horizon to the northeast, hidden, waiting, exactly where the codebreakers said the enemy would come. Then comes the moment that decides everything. Nagumo gets 2 pieces of bad news at once. His Midway strike needs to be repeated, the island isn't knocked out. And a scout plane reports American ships, carriers. Now Nagumo faces an impossible choice. His planes are armed for hitting land. To attack ships, they need different weapons, torpedoes and armor-piercing bombs. Rearming takes time he may not have, and the clock is against him. His Midway strike planes are coming back now low on fuel, circling, waiting to land. His decks are already a tangle of aircraft and fuel lines. Launch a half-ready strike immediately or clear the decks, arm everything properly, and hit with one hammer blow. He hesitates. He decides to recover his returning planes, rearm everything, and launch one massive coordinated strike. It's the textbook choice, and it's fatal. Because while he hesitates, his flight decks fill up. Fueled planes, stacked bombs, fuel lines snaking across the decks, 4 carriers turned into floating warehouses of gasoline and high explosive, and the Americans are already coming. The first U.S. attacks are a slaughter. The torpedo bombers go in first slow, low, and alone. Hornet's Torpedo Squadron 8 has no fighter escort. 15 planes, led by Lieutenant Commander John Waldron. Japanese Zeros tear them apart. All 15 are shot down. All 15. Of the 30 men, 1 survives Ensign George Gay. He ditches in the sea, hides under a floating cushion, and watches the rest of the battle from the water. 1 man, alone in the Pacific. The last living witness of his squadron. He was about to see what their deaths bought. It looks like a massacre for nothing. But it isn't. Those doomed torpedo runs drag the Japanese fighters down to sea level. Low, out of position, and high above at 14,000 feet the sky is suddenly empty of defenders. If this is gripping you, hit the like button. It genuinely helps us keep making these. Now the dive bombers arrive. U.S. Douglas Dauntless dive bombers from the Enterprise and the Yorktown reach the Japanese fleet at almost the same moment. By skill, guesswork, and desperate flying, 2 squadrons converge from different directions. They roll into their dives, nearly vertical, engines screaming. Below them, the crowded decks of Akagi, Kaga, and Soryu, loaded with fuel and bombs. The worst possible moment to be hit. The bombs fall. On the Kaga, explosions walk down the flight deck. Fuel ignites. Armed bombs cook off. On the Soryu, 3 hits turn her into a torch in seconds. On the Akagi, Nagumo's own flagship, a single bomb hits the packed hangar. The chain reaction guts her from the inside. Every crowded deck, the fueled planes, the stacked bombs, the delay Nagumo bought to do it right becomes the fuel that destroys him. The tidiest choice on the board turns into a firestorm. In about 5 minutes, 3 of Japan's 4 carriers are blazing wrecks. Stop and feel that. At the start of those 5 minutes, Japan is winning the Pacific War. At the end, she has lost it. The men who lived through it said they watched the war turn in real time. 1 carrier is left, the Soryu, and she comes out swinging. Soryu launches her planes. She finds the Yorktown, the carrier, the shipyard rebuilt in 3 days. 2 waves of Japanese attacks hammer her, bombs and torpedoes. The Yorktown loses power and lists. Her crew fights to save her. For a few hours the battle hangs even. 3 Japanese carriers are gone, but the last one has just crippled the carrier America raised from the dead in 3 days. 1 enemy deck is still in the fight. It cannot be allowed to see nightfall. But late that same day, U.S. dive bombers find the Soryu, and they do to her what they did to the others. By nightfall, all 4 Japanese carriers Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, Soryu are sunk or sinking. The same 4 carriers that hit Pearl Harbor. Gone. In a single day. Here's why Midway was more than a battle won. It was a wound that never healed. Japan lost 4 fleet carriers. That hurt. But ships can be rebuilt. What Japan lost with them could not. Going down with those carriers were the men who ran them. Veteran pilots, master mechanics, flight deck crews who could arm and launch aircraft faster than anyone alive. Roughly 3,000 men. An entire generation of naval expertise. Japan had spent years training that cadre. You can build a carrier in a couple of years. You cannot mass-produce a veteran. The skill that died at Midway was gone for good. Consider what it takes to make one of those men. Years of training, endless hours over open water, the nerve to land a plane on a pitching deck, the muscle memory to arm and spot a strike while the ship heels beneath you. That knowledge lived in a few thousand men, and in a single day, most of it sank into the Pacific. And on the other side of the ocean, American industry was just warming up. The shipyards that Pearl Harbor failed to destroy went into overdrive. In the years after Midway, the United States built carriers by the dozen. Japan could not keep pace, not in ships, not in trained men. Midway didn't end the war. 3 more brutal years of fighting lay ahead, but it ended Japan's advance. After Midway, Japan was on defense, and it never went back on offense again. The tide of the entire Pacific War turned on a single day in June. We started with a question. How did a battered, outnumbered U.S. fleet end up waiting in exactly the right place as if someone had read the enemy's battle plan? Now you know, someone had. A man named Joseph Rochefort in a basement at Pearl Harbor in a red smoking jacket and slippers. He read enough of a broken Japanese code to find a target hiding behind 2 letters AF. And then he proved it with 13 words about a broken water tank. That's the secret the numbers can't show you. On paper, Japan had 4 carriers to America's 3. More planes, better trained pilots. The momentum of 6 months of victory. America had one thing Japan didn't. America knew the plan. The pilots who dove on those carriers were brave beyond words. The men of Torpedo Squadron 8 flew to their deaths to clear the sky. The shipyard workers rebuilt a carrier in 3 days. All of that was real. All of it mattered. But courage put the Americans in the fight. Intelligence put them in the right place. Pearl Harbor taught a generation a hard lesson about surprise. Midway taught the answer to it. Information. The same idea runs straight through to today. Modern intelligence agencies, cyber warfare, the race to read the other side's signals before they read yours. It all traces back to men like Rochefort breaking a code by hand and proving that the most powerful weapon in a war isn't always the one that goes bang. Sometimes the deadliest weapon in the arsenal is simply knowing what the enemy is going to do next. Next time we go inside another secret that changed a war one fought not with ships but with lies. Subscribe now and don't miss it.